Sometimes the smallest voices arrive when the biggest decisions are about to be made. Nathan Walker had heard thousands of phone calls during his 20 years as the founder of Walker Technologies, but none of them had ever interrupted a board meeting once the conference room doors were closed. That Monday morning, 43 floors above downtown Seattle, 12 executives sat around a polished walnut table reviewing documents for the largest acquisition in the company's history. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline, where gray clouds drifted above Elliott Bay and ferries crossed the water like tiny white dots. Nathan held a silver fountain pen above the final contract. One signature would complete a deal worth nearly $2 billion. Every person in the room waited in complete silence. Then the conference phone blinked. Nathan frowned. His executive assistant knew the rule better than anyone. No calls during a final signing unless it involved an emergency. The light continued flashing. One of the directors cleared his throat impatiently. Nathan pressed the speaker button. This had better be important. His assistant answered with unusual hesitation. Sir. I know your policy. I am very sorry, but there is a little girl on the line. She keeps asking for you by name. She refuses to speak with anyone else. Several people around the table exchanged puzzled glances. Nathan almost asked her to transfer the call to customer service. Almost. But something in his assistant's voice made him pause. Put her through, he said quietly. A few seconds passed before a tiny voice reached the room. It sounded careful rather than frightened, as though its owner had practiced every word many times before finding the courage to speak. Hello? Nathan leaned slightly toward the speaker. This is Nathan Walker. There was another pause. Soft breathing. Then two simple words. Please, wait. Nathan did not realize he had lowered the pen until it touched the table instead of the contract. Nobody else in the room moved either. The little girl continued in a voice so gentle it barely rose above a whisper. I am sorry for calling your office. I know you are busy. Nathan found himself answering more softly than usual. It is all right. What is your name? Emma Collins. How old are you, Emma? I turned 8 last month. One of the board members silently pointed toward the unsigned contract, reminding Nathan that dozens of investors were waiting. Nathan did not look away from the speakerphone. How did you get this number? He asked. Mom keeps it inside her work notebook, Emma replied. She said only important people should call it. I hope I did not do something wrong. Nathan felt an unexpected weight settle across the room. Why did you want to talk to me? The answer did not come immediately. Instead, he heard the faint ticking of what sounded like an old kitchen clock somewhere on the other end of the line. Finally, Emma spoke again. If Mommy misses work today, she stopped to take a careful breath. Will you still let her come back? The words drifted through the conference room with astonishing quietness, yet they seemed louder than every business presentation Nathan had ever heard. Around the long table, laptops remained open, contracts waited to be signed, financial advisors sat frozen, but none of them seemed important anymore. Nathan slowly closed the folder containing the acquisition papers and stood from his chair. His voice, steady only moments earlier, became unexpectedly gentle. Emma, he said, tell me what happened. For a few seconds Nathan heard nothing except the gentle ticking of the clock on Emma's end of the line and the quiet hum of the conference room behind him. Every executive around the table remained perfectly still, watching the man who had never postponed a meeting for anyone. Nathan had built his reputation on discipline. Employees joked that his calendar was more reliable than the sunrise. Birthdays, holidays, even severe winter storms had never changed his schedule. Yet that morning, one little voice had already done what billion-dollar negotiations never could. Emma, he asked softly, where's your mother right now? The little girl answered without panic, almost as though she believed everything would make sense once she explained it correctly. She is still in her bedroom. I made breakfast because she always wakes up before me, but today she did not come to the kitchen. Nathan glanced toward the conference room windows where rain had begun falling gently over Seattle. Did you try waking her? Yes, sir, Emma replied politely. I made pancakes the way she taught me. I even made coffee because she likes 2 little spoons of sugar. But she said she was very tired last night and needed to rest. She still has not come to work. Nathan felt his chest grow unexpectedly heavy. Is anyone else with you? No, sir. Do you have family nearby? Emma hesitated. Mom always says it is just us. Nathan lowered his eyes for a moment. Across the table, several executives quietly closed their laptops, sensing the meeting was no longer the center of his attention. Emma, he continued, how did you know to call me? Mom keeps a notebook beside the phone, she answered. She writes everything down because she never wants to forget important things. Your number is on the first page with a little blue star beside it. She told me if she was ever late for work, I should call the office and tell everyone she was sorry. Nathan frowned gently. Did she tell you to ask for me? No. Emma paused before adding in her small, honest voice, but everybody else kept saying they would leave a message. I thought messages might take too long. Nathan closed his eyes briefly. Somewhere inside the quiet innocence of that sentence was a trust he felt he had not earned. Can you tell me your address? Emma carefully read every number and street name exactly as it appeared on an envelope lying beside the telephone. Nathan recognized the neighborhood immediately. It was nearly 40 minutes from the company headquarters. He wrote it down on the margin of the unsigned acquisition papers. Then he looked around the conference room. 12 executives waited for instructions that never came. Nathan calmly closed the contract folder and slid it away from the center of the table. We will continue this meeting another day, he said. One director looked surprised. Nathan, the investors have already arrived. Nathan nodded politely. Then they can wait. He picked up his suit jacket, slipped his phone into his pocket, and walked toward the conference room door without another glance at the billion-dollar agreement. Before leaving, he lifted the phone one last time. Emma, he said with quiet reassurance, I need you to stay exactly where you are. Do not worry about your mother's job. I am coming to see you myself. On the other end of the line, the little girl released the smallest sigh of relief. Thank you, Mr. Walker, she whispered. Mom always said kind people keep their promises. I hope she was right. Rain streaked across Nathan's windshield as he drove through the quiet streets of Seattle, leaving behind the glass towers of downtown for older neighborhoods lined with maple trees and modest apartment buildings. The windshield wipers moved steadily back and forth, but they could not clear the thoughts filling his mind. During the entire drive he replayed Emma's careful words over and over. She had never asked for money. She had never cried. She had only worried that her mother might lose her job. That single concern revealed more about the woman raising her than any employee file ever could. Nathan pressed the accelerator a little more firmly, arriving less than 35 minutes later in front of a small brick apartment building with flower boxes beneath the windows, even though the winter blooms had long since faded. The building looked old but lovingly maintained. Children's bicycles rested neatly beside the entrance, and someone had carefully swept the front steps despite the steady rain. Nathan parked, looked once more at the handwritten address on the folded acquisition papers resting on the passenger seat, then walked quickly toward apartment 3B. Before he even reached the door, it slowly opened from the inside. Emma stood there exactly as he had imagined from her gentle voice. She was a little blonde girl with pale blue eyes and a faded blue sweater beneath a light gray cardigan that looked slightly too large for her. She offered a shy smile the moment she recognized him from the company website photograph she had clearly memorized. Hello, Mr. Walker, she said politely. Thank you for coming. Nathan found himself smiling back despite the heaviness in his chest. You must be Emma. She nodded. Please come in. I cleaned up because Mom always says guests should feel welcome. The apartment was small but spotless. Fresh pancakes sat neatly on 2 plates at the kitchen table beside a mug of coffee that had grown cold. A folded napkin rested under each plate as though breakfast had only been delayed by a few minutes instead of an entire morning. Everything reflected quiet care rather than wealth. Nathan noticed children's drawings attached to the refrigerator with colorful magnets, a bookshelf filled with library books, and a tiny potted plant growing beside the kitchen window despite the cloudy weather outside. Emma quietly pointed toward the hallway. Mom is still resting. Nathan followed her at a respectful pace until they reached a partially open bedroom door. A woman rested peacefully beneath a blanket, breathing slowly and evenly, her face pale with obvious exhaustion rather than distress. Nathan immediately realized she needed prompt medical attention, but there was no sign of panic inside the room, only unusual stillness. He stepped back into the hallway and gently knelt to Emma's eye level. Has your mother been feeling tired for a long time? Emma nodded. She says work is busy and everything will be better after next month. Nathan asked another careful question. Did she ever tell anyone at work she needed help? Emma slowly shook her head. She always smiles before leaving the apartment. She says people already have enough worries, so she should not add hers to theirs. Nathan lowered his eyes. Those words stayed with him longer than any business speech he had ever heard. Emma reached into the pocket of her cardigan and carefully unfolded a small piece of paper she had been carrying all morning. Mom asked me to remember this if she ever missed work, she whispered before handing it to him. Written in neat blue ink were just 2 simple instructions. Call Mr. Walker. Trust kindness. Nathan stared at the note in complete silence, realizing that somehow a woman he barely remembered by name had trusted him long before he had ever learned her. Story. Emma quietly folded the little note after Nathan finished reading it and slipped it back into her cardigan pocket as though it were something too precious to lose. Nathan looked once more toward the bedroom where her mother rested peacefully. He took out his phone, stepped into the hallway, and made 2 calm calls. The first was to request immediate medical assistance for someone who appeared to need professional evaluation. The second was to his executive assistant. Cancel everything on my calendar for today, he said. She hesitated only long enough to ask, including the investor meeting? Nathan looked around the tiny apartment before answering. Especially the investor meeting. He ended the call and returned to the kitchen where Emma had already reheated the pancakes in the microwave. She placed 1 plate in front of him with quiet confidence. They taste better when they are warm, she explained. Nathan smiled gently. Did you make these yourself? Emma nodded proudly. Mom taught me on Saturdays. She always says breakfast should make people feel like they are not alone. Nathan picked up a fork and tasted a small bite. They were not perfect, but they carried something no expensive restaurant could ever serve. Care. He looked at Emma across the table. They are wonderful. Her face brightened immediately. Really? Really. For a brief moment the apartment no longer felt heavy with uncertainty. It simply felt like a home where love had always been more abundant than money. Nathan's attention drifted toward a neatly organized planner lying beside the refrigerator. Emma noticed him looking. That is Mom's work notebook, she said. She writes everything in there because she does not want to forget anybody. Nathan asked softly, may I look at it? Emma carefully carried it to him with both hands. The cover showed years of careful use. Every page was neatly dated, filled with schedules, reminders, grocery lists, library due dates, and encouraging notes written to herself. On 1 page she had written, remember Emma's science project Tuesday. Another read, buy strawberries if they are on sale. Near the back Nathan discovered a carefully folded company identification badge. The smiling photograph showed a younger version of Emma's mother wearing the Walker Technologies employee uniform. Tucked behind the badge rested a faded business card with Nathan's name printed across it. On the back someone had handwritten a single sentence. Never forget the people behind the numbers. Nathan stared at the familiar handwriting. He had written those words himself during the company's first year and handed that card to dozens of employees while believing every face would remain unforgettable. Somewhere along the years he had stopped seeing individuals and started seeing departments, budgets, and reports. A gentle knock sounded at the apartment door. Nathan opened it to greet the medical team he had requested. They entered with calm professionalism, speaking kindly to Emma before checking on her mother. Nathan remained nearby but gave them space to work. Emma quietly stood beside him, slipping her small hand into his without saying a word. He looked down, surprised by how naturally she trusted him. A few minutes later one of the medical professionals returned to the hallway with a reassuring smile. She is awake now, the woman said gently. She is exhausted and needs proper care, but she is able to speak with you for a few moments if she feels comfortable. Nathan exhaled slowly, grateful beyond words. Emma's eyes filled with hopeful tears as she whispered, I knew Mom would not want to miss work forever. Nathan gently rested a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Right now, he said softly, the only job your mother has is getting better. We will take care of everything else. Later that afternoon the apartment grew quieter as gentle rain continued tapping against the windows. Emma sat on the living room rug coloring pictures with a small box of crayons while the medical team prepared to transport her mother for further care and observation. Nathan remained near the kitchen, giving everyone the privacy they deserved while still making certain Emma never felt alone. A few minutes later one of the medical professionals stepped into the hallway with a reassuring smile. She asked if she could speak with you for just a moment, the woman said softly. Nathan nodded and entered the bedroom. Emma's mother rested comfortably against the pillows, looking tired but peaceful. Her eyes slowly opened, and for a brief second confusion crossed her face before recognition settled in. Mr. Walker, she whispered with quiet surprise. I am so sorry. I never wanted to cause trouble. Nathan gently pulled a chair beside the bed. You have not caused any trouble. Emma was worried about you. A faint smile appeared on her face. She has always been brave. Nathan looked toward the hallway where Emma's laughter drifted softly from the living room. She called me herself. Tears quietly filled the woman's eyes. Then she remembered. Nathan reached into his jacket pocket and carefully placed the small note she had written beside the bed. She remembered everything. The woman closed her fingers gently around the paper before looking toward the kitchen. There is something else, she said. Inside the blue tin box above the refrigerator. Emma knows where it is. I always hoped I would never need anyone to open it. Nathan stepped into the kitchen, and Emma immediately stood. The blue box, she asked quietly. Mom told me it was only for a very important day. She carefully climbed onto a small wooden stool and reached for a faded blue tin container resting on the highest shelf. The edges were worn from years of careful use. She carried it to the table with both hands before placing it in front of Nathan. Mom said only someone she trusted could open it. Nathan slowly lifted the lid. Inside were simple treasures arranged with extraordinary care. An old Walker Technologies employee identification badge rested beside Emma's hospital bracelet from the day she was born. There was a shiny silver lucky coin polished smooth by years of handling, a faded birthday photograph of Emma smiling in homemade paper crowns, and a neatly folded letter tied with a pale blue ribbon. Beneath everything lay an old business card bearing Nathan's name from the earliest years of the company. Emma looked curiously at the card. Mom kept that in every apartment we ever lived in, she said. Nathan carefully unfolded the letter but stopped before reading it. Instead, he turned the paper over. On the outside, written in graceful blue handwriting, were the words, "Please read this only after you have met my daughter." His heartbeat slowed. He looked toward Emma, who sat quietly swinging her feet beneath the chair, trusting that whatever was inside belonged exactly where it was. Nathan unfolded the first page. The opening sentence immediately stole the air from the room. Dear Mr. Walker, if Emma has found you, then life has already given my daughter the one thing I always hoped she would have. Someone who remembers that people will always matter more than profit. Nathan lowered the letter for a moment, unable to speak, realizing this was not simply a message left for a company founder. It was a promise that had been waiting for him long before he ever answered the telephone that morning. Nathan remained seated at the kitchen table long after he finished reading the first page of the letter. Outside, the rain had finally stopped, leaving tiny drops of water clinging to the apartment windows while soft afternoon light slowly filled the room. Emma quietly colored another picture without interrupting him. Every so often she looked up just to make sure he was still there, then returned to her crayons with complete trust. Nathan unfolded the next page. The handwriting remained steady and graceful, every sentence carrying the quiet strength of someone who had spent years thinking more about others than herself. She wrote that she had joined Walker Technologies during its earliest days when the company occupied only one rented office with second-hand furniture and endless determination. She described watching young employees believe they were building something that could change lives instead of simply selling technology. Nathan smiled faintly. He remembered those mornings. They had all shared coffee from the same old machine and celebrated every new customer as though they had won a championship. Then one paragraph made him stop breathing for a moment. Years ago, after one difficult financial quarter, everyone worried that several employees might lose their jobs. I suggested creating a flexible scheduling system so parents could continue working while caring for their families. The idea was accepted quietly, and life moved on. I never wanted credit. Seeing people keep their jobs was enough. Nathan lowered the letter slowly. He remembered that proposal perfectly. The recommendation had arrived anonymously in the company suggestion box. The board praised him for approving such an innovative policy, yet he had never known who had written it. Emma's mother had changed the lives of hundreds of families without asking anyone to remember her name. Nathan looked toward the living room where Emma had arranged her crayons into perfect rows by color. She smiled proudly when she noticed him watching. Mom says colors are happier when they stay together, she explained. Nathan smiled back, realizing that kindness had quietly shaped every corner of this little family's life. He returned to the final page of the letter. There were no requests for money, promotions, or recognition. Instead, only one simple hope remained. If I ever cannot finish raising Emma myself, please do not teach her that success means working longer than everyone else. Teach her that success is coming home when someone needs you. Help her remember that people are never interruptions. They are the reason our work matters in the first place. Nathan quietly closed his eyes. Those words settled deep inside him, reaching places that years of awards and business victories had never touched. His entire career had been built on never missing a meeting, never delaying a deadline, never allowing emotions to influence decisions. Yet the greatest lesson he had received had come from a woman who had quietly worked in his company for years while expecting nothing in return. Emma carefully walked over holding a fresh drawing. It showed 3 stick figures standing beneath a bright yellow sun. One wore a blue tie. One had long blonde hair. The third held both of their hands. She handed the picture to Nathan with a shy smile. I drew us because Mom says nobody should eat dinner alone if they can help it. Nathan accepted the drawing as though it were the most valuable document he had ever held. He looked at the smiling faces colored in uneven crayon lines and understood that somewhere between one unexpected phone call and one quiet apartment, his definition of leadership had begun to change forever. The following morning dawned clear and bright, washing the city in soft golden light after 2 days of steady rain. Nathan arrived at Walker Technologies earlier than anyone else, carrying Emma's crayon drawing inside the same leather portfolio that had once held billion-dollar contracts. He placed the drawing carefully on his desk before looking out across the busy office floors below. Employees hurried toward elevators carrying coffee cups and laptop bags, each person focused on another demanding workday. For years he had admired that dedication. Today he noticed something different. He wondered how many parents had quietly skipped breakfast with their children to arrive on time. How many people had hidden exhaustion behind polite smiles because they feared disappointing their managers. How many stories, just like Emma's, had remained invisible because nobody had stopped long enough to ask one simple question. Nathan called an emergency leadership meeting before normal business hours began. Department directors gathered with puzzled expressions, expecting news about the delayed acquisition. Instead, Nathan stood beside the conference room window holding the folded letter from Emma's mother. He did not read it aloud. Those words belonged to her family. But he shared what he had learned. Yesterday, he began calmly, I was reminded that every employee has a life waiting for them after they leave this building. We measure productivity every quarter. Beginning today, we will also measure how well we care for the people creating that success. The room fell completely silent. Nathan continued. Effective immediately, Walker Technologies will establish an employee family support program. Flexible schedules, emergency assistance, expanded family leave, and confidential wellness resources will become permanent company policy. Several executives looked surprised. Others slowly smiled with quiet relief. One senior manager finally spoke. What changed your mind? Nathan looked briefly toward the drawing resting inside his portfolio. A little girl reminded me why this company was built in the first place. The announcement spread through the building faster than any financial report. Employees whispered to one another in hallways, cafeteria lines, and break rooms. Some called their families during lunch simply to say they would be home earlier than usual. Others quietly thanked supervisors who had never before heard words like that inside the office. Meanwhile, Emma spent the afternoon visiting her mother, who had already begun recovering under proper medical care. She proudly described everything Nathan had done, carefully explaining that nobody at the company would have to worry as much anymore. Her mother listened with grateful eyes before gently taking Emma's hand. Do you remember what I always told you? She asked softly. Emma nodded. People matter more than schedules. Her mother smiled. Exactly. Later that evening, Nathan stopped by the hospital carrying a small basket filled with fresh fruit, library books for Emma, and the drawing she had given him the day before. Emma immediately ran toward him with a bright smile. You came back. Nathan smiled warmly. I said I would. Emma's mother looked at him with quiet gratitude. You did much more than I ever hoped. Nathan gently shook his head. No. You changed this company years ago. I simply finally learned your name. For a long moment none of them spoke. The fading sunlight streamed through the hospital window, bathing the room in warm golden light. Emma looked from her mother to Nathan before asking the simplest question of all. Does this mean people at your company will get to go home when someone needs them? Nathan smiled without hesitation. Yes, Emma. That starts today. The little girl looked toward her mother with tears of quiet happiness in her eyes. Then your letter worked, she whispered, and Nathan realized that sometimes the greatest victories would never appear on a balance sheet, but they could change thousands of lives all the same. Over the following weeks, small changes began spreading through Walker Technologies in ways no financial forecast could have predicted. Parents who had once hurried through dinner now arrived home while the sun was still shining. Children no longer waited alone at school after evening activities because someone from their family could finally be there on time. Managers began opening meetings with a different question than quarterly targets. Instead of asking only about deadlines, they quietly asked whether everyone had what they needed to succeed both at work and at home. Nathan walked through the headquarters one afternoon without announcing his visit, noticing conversations that sounded lighter than before. Laughter drifted from break rooms. Employees paused to share photographs of their families without worrying they were wasting valuable time. The company still worked hard, but the atmosphere had changed. Productivity had not disappeared. It had simply learned to make room for humanity. Emma's mother continued growing stronger each week, supported by proper care and the peace of knowing she no longer had to choose between her health and her livelihood. One Saturday morning, Nathan accepted an invitation to visit their apartment again. This time the scent of freshly baked blueberry muffins greeted him before Emma opened the door with an excited smile. "Mom made your favorite," she announced proudly. Nathan laughed softly. "I do not remember ever telling anyone my favorite." Emma grinned. Mom remembered from years ago. The small apartment looked brighter than ever. Fresh flowers rested on the kitchen table, sunlight poured through the windows, and the little potted plant beside the sink had grown several new green leaves. Emma's mother welcomed Nathan with genuine warmth instead of apology. For the first time in years, she said quietly, "I slept without worrying about Monday morning." Nathan looked around the cozy kitchen and realized how many families might now be experiencing that same feeling because of one decision made from the heart instead of a spreadsheet. After breakfast, Emma disappeared into her bedroom before returning with the faded blue tin box. She carefully placed it on the table once again. "There is one more thing," she said. Nathan looked surprised. "I thought we had already opened everything." Emma smiled. "Not the bottom." She gently lifted the removable lining inside the tin. Hidden beneath it rested a single folded sheet of paper and the old silver lucky coin. Nathan unfolded the page with careful hands. It contained no long message. Instead, it listed dozens of first names followed by small handwritten notes. Every name belonged to someone who had once worked at Walker Technologies. Beside each one, Emma's mother had written a simple act of kindness they had shown another employee over the years. Shared lunch with a new hire. Stayed late to help a teammate. Visited a coworker after surgery. Covered a shift so someone could attend a school concert. At the bottom she had written one final sentence. "Companies are remembered for products. People are remembered for kindness. Please protect both." Nathan quietly placed the paper back inside the tin. The silver lucky coin caught the afternoon sunlight, reflecting a warm glow across the kitchen table. Emma picked it up and pressed it gently into his hand. "Mom says you should keep it now." Nathan looked toward her mother. She nodded with a grateful smile. "It brought us hope for many years. I think it belongs with the person helping hope grow for everyone else." Nathan closed his fingers around the worn silver coin, realizing it was worth more than any award displayed in his office because it represented something no amount of wealth could ever purchase. It represented trust that had been earned one kind decision at a time. 1 year later, the first Monday of autumn arrived beneath a sky so clear that Mount Rainier could be seen beyond the Seattle skyline. Nathan stood quietly in the lobby of Walker Technologies long before employees began arriving. The polished marble floors looked the same, the glass walls reflected the same morning light, yet everything inside the building felt different. Parents walked through the front doors without the familiar look of quiet exhaustion. Some carried photographs from weekend family trips. Others smiled while talking about school concerts, birthday dinners, and evenings finally spent at home instead of the office. The company had continued to grow, but so had something far more valuable. Kindness had become part of its foundation. Nathan reached into his desk drawer before heading upstairs. Inside rested the small silver lucky coin, Emma's crayon drawing, and the faded business card that still carried the handwritten reminder, "Never forget the people behind the numbers." He kept them together because they all represented the same lesson. Success meant very little if nobody felt seen along the way. Just after 9 o'clock his office phone rang. The caller identification displayed a familiar number. Nathan answered almost immediately. "Good morning," he said warmly. A cheerful little voice filled the room. "Hello, Mr. Walker." Nathan smiled before she even finished speaking. "Good morning, Emma." She laughed softly. I wanted to call before school started. Through the phone he could hear children talking in the background and a school bell preparing to ring. How is your mother? Nathan asked. She is wonderful, Emma replied proudly. She makes breakfast every morning now, and she does not worry about missing work anymore. She says work feels different because people smile more. Nathan looked out across the city, feeling a quiet gratitude that words could not fully express. I am very happy to hear that. Emma became quiet for a moment. There is something else I wanted to tell you. Nathan waited patiently. Mom said I should never forget to thank people who keep their promises. Nathan closed his eyes briefly as her words settled gently into his heart. Your mother taught me how important promises really are, he answered. Emma giggled. She also said I should tell you one more thing. What is that? Nathan asked. She said she would be proud of the company you built. Nathan looked around his office, then toward the busy hallways beyond the glass walls. He realized she was not talking about buildings, technology, or profits. She was talking about people. Thank you, Emma, he said quietly. That means more than you know. The school bell rang again. I have to go now, Emma said. Have a wonderful day, Mr. Walker. You too, Emma. After the call ended, Nathan remained standing beside the window for a long moment. Down below, hundreds of employees entered the building carrying briefcases, lunch bags, and family photographs tucked inside backpacks. Each person had a story waiting beyond the office doors. Nathan slipped the silver coin into his pocket and walked toward the elevator, determined never to forget that every meeting, every policy, and every decision would always affect someone's home long after the workday ended. Because true wealth was never measured by the value of a company or the size of a fortune. It was measured by the number of lives made gentler through kindness, the promises kept when nobody was watching, and the quiet courage to answer one unexpected phone call that reminded a lonely millionaire and a little girl that the greatest success in life will always begin with choosing people first.